That reality hit me actually after I became an attending, which is so weird because here I am a resident and I'm working with my attending. And I see that they're on call just like me up at 2 a.m. And for some reason in my head, I thought that won't be me.
Welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable, real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. Today, I had an amazing conversation with Dr. Elisha Peterson. She's triple board certified in anesthesiology, pediatric anesthesiology, and pain medicine. And she's now the host of Sevo Sistas podcast, where she speaks about anesthesiology. But I think the most interesting piece of this conversation is Elisha's path. So how she basically crushed a six-figure student loan debt, mitigated, reduced her tax burden, and now is living a happy and fulfilled life, doing what she wants to do when she wants to do it, and having that autonomy that she thought being a doctor would give her. Please welcome Dr. Elisha Peterson to the show. All right, here we go again, and we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Elisha Peterson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fabulous. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here with you and your listeners.
Yeah.
I hope they get value out of our discussion today.
Absolutely. We're going to pull it on out and put it on the table and dive in deep. So tell us all your dirty stories, Elisha. No, I'm just messing with you. We're excited to have you here on the show as well, too. Where are you coming from today?
I reside in DC. I am from Chicago.
Interesting. So Chicago is cold. I grew up across the lake from there in Southwest Michigan. So I know what that's like in the old windy city there. So now in DC, Elisha, and tell us a little bit about your medical journey. Where did you start and where you're at now?
Wow. That's a loaded question. I will say that, I did not grow up with a family of doctors. Okay. Nobody in my household was even in any way connected to medicine. My mom is an engineer, and she wanted to push me into that because there's not that many women in the field, and she enjoyed understanding how things work. The relationship between mother and daughter is pretty complicated. So I naturally rebelled against that. However, I became interested in how things worked more on the human side instead of the mechanical side. I grew up a latchkey kid. Both of my parents worked. So I spent a lot of time watching TV, and I grew up watching The Cosby Show, scandal aside. But he was my exposure to the thought of becoming a doctor. And I loved how in that show it portrayed doctors as being their own bosses, seeing patients in their own time and making a valuable impact. And so I told everyone at that point that I was going to be a doctor, having no exposure really to what the nuts and bolts of that really looked like. And my parents, both of them have master's degrees. Both of them worked, their W-2 jobs, and they spent their money on a bunch of stuff. So we had a grand piano in our house, grandfather clocks, all this expensive carpet, wallpaper, cars. Nothing was saved for my education. Mm-hmm. So when it came to undergrad and announcing that I'm going to be pre-med, it was like, okay, how are we going to pay for this? And my dad emptied his retirement to pay for my first semester of college.
Oh, wow.
And after that, I took on debt and took on more debt to go into medical school. So by the end of the schooling part of it, I had over $300K in debt.
Wow.
Now, those numbers just felt like fairy dust to me because I'm like, it is what it is. It didn't feel real until I got my first attending job, and the government said, you owe us all this money in taxes, because I didn't pay a thing throughout school, throughout training, and I deferred all my student loans. And the reality of all of the debt I was in didn't hit me until I started making some decent money. So just going back as far as the medical journey, I went to Loyola Chicago undergrad. I stayed in the Midwest for majority of my education. After Loyola, I took 2 years off. I spent a year at NIH doing like a clinical research internship, looking at DNA. And then I spent a summer in Ghana, again, doing research, analyzing the brain and blood samples of kids who died of severe malarial anemia. And then following that, I came back and I taught fourth graders for a year.
Oh, wow.
And I would argue that teaching fourth graders, that was my first real job, because it was at that moment that I realized that this whole life thing isn't about me. So walking out of college, I had my chest poked out. I'm like, oh yeah, I got this. I study, I know what I'm doing. And it wasn't until I got into that school and those kids were running around in that classroom that I realized, oh my gosh, I don't know anything. And it started this process of me learning how to learn, learning how to teach, and forming relationships with parents, with the kids, with the administrators. And that was the foundation which set me up to be a great physician later in life.
And now, you worked with kids, right? And not only just working with kids, but anesthesiology with children and pediatrics, PEDS, right?
Yeah, pediatric anesthesia. So I knew I always had a heart for kids. Throughout college, I volunteered at different community programs. I love the energy they bring. I love their honesty. And yeah, that carried forth throughout my career as a through line. Following teaching fourth graders, that is when I went to Rush Medical College. And Rush has a great relationship with Cook County. Cook County is one of the best county hospitals in the world, in the U.S. particularly too. And it was just fantastic training, working with some of the top physicians around the world coming to Cook County. And it also, I'm working with people who have really difficult psychosocial conditions, financial means. So I got definitely a well-rounded education at Rush Medical College for sure. Yeah. And then following that, I went to following Rush Medical College, I actually went to SUNY Downstate for pediatric intern year. So many people, when they do intern years, they do it in, internal medicine or surgery. It's not too often you come across a pediatric intern year, but as I was looking for this, because again, I have a heart for kids. And when it comes to the questions or the problems I want to solve, I'd rather get a call about a kid with bronchiolitis than, a 90-year-old who has a urosepsis. And so there's only a few programs in the country that offer pediatric intern years, and I was able to get one in SUNY Downstate. So I lived in Brooklyn for a year, which was absolutely fabulous. They say that everyone should live in New York for a year. I strongly, strongly agree with that. It was just the diversity of people, food, experiences was just top notch. Now, to go from Brooklyn to St. Louis, that was pretty traumatic. Mm-hmm. To go from something where everything is open at all times of day, you can get whatever you want and it's nearby, to the town closes at like 9:00 at night. Yeah. And there's not the diversity of people and food there. It was very tough. Yeah. So throughout residency, that first year was incredibly challenging. Not only the transition from going from Brooklyn to St. Louis, but I also discovered I was pregnant. So I got married after med school graduation. And, when you interview for these residency programs, it's years before, you actually attend there. Right. So it wasn't like I could tell the program, oh, when I get here, I'm going to be pregnant. Like, I didn't know. So when I show up and I, tell them I'm pregnant, they're taking it back. I'll never forget, my program director looked at me and he was like, did you plan this? And I was looking at him like, no, I did not plan this. Like, this is just what it is. Yeah. And so anesthesiology is a very male dominated field. and the leadership is very much men. And so to be pregnant in that space made people feel awkward and uncomfortable. And I was already sort of feeling uncomfortable being in a new city, in a new program, and pregnant. So that first year was one of the biggest challenges for me.
Wow. So when you were, as a child, kind of growing up, watching Dr. Cosby, right? And that idea of, hey, doctors get to work on their own time and see their own patients, and it seemed all sunshine and rainbows and great. Tell me a little bit about what that felt like when you realized that that's not the way the world worked.
Yeah, amen to that. That reality hit me actually after I became an attending, which is so weird because here I am a resident and I'm working with my attendings and I see that they're on call just like me up at 2 a.m. And for some reason in my head, I thought that won't be me, even though I'm looking at what my future self would be if I continued on this path. It was just the most oddest thing. I did not think that. And then when I became an attending, that was when oh, your schedule is made for you. You're seeing patients this time and this time. And oh, you need more time for some of these super complex patients? Well, that's on you if you take longer. For cases when they're booked, cases run over all the time. Turnover takes forever. And the schedule might have you think that you're out by 3:30. So you try to make plans. And it's like, nope, not out till 5. So that slapped me in the face because, again, the driver for me to want to be a physician was that appeal of autonomy, having control of my time and being able to be with my family and still contribute. And it was very clear that working the W-2 academic path that I was on and having that autonomy just were not going to sit well together. It just wasn't. Mm-hmm. And it was very hard for me to swallow that pill because I'm like, man, the society tells you that this is what you want. You want this W-2 job. You want that security and stability. But then they don't tell you that you're sacrificing your freedom and your autonomy, and that in order to break through, to get the wealth that we all desire. And when I mean wealth, I don't necessarily mean money. I mean having that autonomy to do what you want when you want. You're not going to get that straight W-2 job. It's just not going to happen. And I think that realization was the biggest, it was the hardest pill to swallow, but it was an awakening for me. I was like, man, I don't want to ride this. If I think of cows riding that treadmill, going to the slaughterhouse, I'm like, oh crap, I'm one of these cows. Like the slaughterhouse is where dreams go to die. And if I don't get off of this, a part of me is going to die. And I'm going to be one of these walking zombies, complaining about my job, but still feeling like I have to continue on the hamster wheel because I have student loan debt, because I have bills to pay. And it's like, no, I'm controlling the ship.
Yeah. And that idea, that life is not a TV show. It's not, we're not going to wake up and be Mr. Bill Cosby there on the Cosby Show, all the other stuff aside, but just on that show alone, it doesn't work like that. And we create these, I heard it called yesterday, the golden handcuff scenario. We're building this machine that's going to kill us. And we need to decide and understand that our health is our wealth. We don't have any wealth without our health. And wealth is not, just like you're saying, is not just money. And the reason why it's not just money is because you need to ask yourself, why? Why do I want this money? What am I going to do with it? Right? And dig deeper and say, when you want your time back, why do you want your time back? What are you going to do with it? Those are the things that are going to make you happy, Elisha. And it's just that same regard where looking back through it, it's again, from the outside. I always tell everybody I'm the outsider looking in on these situations and not necessarily these situations, because I lived the same thing in my life. Just because I'm not a physician doesn't mean that I don't have those same challenges. I'm a high performance person, which means I give it everything I got, and there's my blinders are on and I'm running, I'm gunning. And then when I lift my head up and I look around and nobody's around me, it's like, what happened? Right? This isn't a TV show I thought it was going to be. So I experienced the same thing. We're creating this machine that's going to eat us, whether it's in a partnership in a practice, in the corporate world as a W-2. That's the conveyor belt you're talking about. And the interesting piece of that too is if we don't take the time to lift our head up and understand the why, the what, the how, what are we doing? Where's the happiness? Lay out some buckets here. I've got a bucket here that I call happiness. I need to fill that bucket. And I don't want any holes in that bucket. The money bucket that we fill, there's a couple ways that we could fill that, also has holes in it. And there's the holes, sometimes are caused by the thing that you mentioned, W-2, and the taxation piece of that too. So the United States government has loved your parents for the path that they have chosen, because they, paid their taxes, paid a lot of taxes, and they raised a wonderful young child to put them through the same process and the same kind of conditioning. You get a good job and you work and you save, and that's what you do. So they've paid all these taxes. Now you've paid a lot of taxes in the W-2 world too. So it's just that reoccurring thing, but that's that conveyor belt, that's that conveyor belt of running through. Where does life change for Elisha? Where does that moment, okay, this is not a TV show. What am I going to do? I need to be happy, right? We've got the baby there in residency, which I'm sure was a challenge. And kind of looking up, okay, now I'm earning, my earning power is picked up, but I'm still in this golden handcuff scenario. There's something that fascinating that happens as our income increases, our expenses increase. And there's this lifestyle creep. So you probably have experienced some of that through this journey too. You've got this overwhelming burden of debt on you. Where are we at? Where does that change? Where does that moment happen? Like, okay, this is the path.
Yes. So throughout residency, I didn't have just one baby. I had, throughout my training, a total of 3 babies. One in the first year of anesthesia residency, one in the last year, and then one during my pain fellowship. So following residency, I did a pediatric anesthesia fellowship and then a pain fellowship. So it was every other year. And what hit me as I became an attending, my first job out of training, was I'm discovering that I don't have, this time autonomy. I'm supposed to be a boss, and yet I don't feel like it at all. And one of the main things I did was I need to get this debt off of me. Okay. So the 6-figure debt that I'm carrying. And I began looking for other spaces where it's like, okay, how can I get rid of debt? And I came across Dave Ramsey. So, and I'm hearing their stories about, folks who are even in worse financial situations than me. And it was very encouraging. So I didn't do necessarily rice and beans and rice, as he's always talking about eating. However, I did put a significant amount of money on that debt, and I was able to get out of that 6-figure debt in 3 years. So wow. Yeah, really got
Congratulations. Congratulations on the 3 babies and getting out of that debt. So that's awesome.
Thanks. So yeah, it definitely takes a community. And so, the Dave Ramsey community and all of the podcasts, that really helped me during that time. The shift came for me though, when it was like, okay, now that I got rid of the student loan debt, whoa, these taxes are crazy. And the audience that Dave Ramsey serves is not necessarily high income earners. So I wasn't getting information as to how can I decrease this tax burden. Now enter in like Letty and Kenji. These are 2 physicians who looked at real estate and promote real estate as a way of keeping more of what you earn. And learning about Dave, at the time that I became familiar with them on their podcast, and they have a course, they really promoted long-term multifamily units, having as many families under one roof for cash flow. because at the time it's like, yeah, I want mailbox money. I want regular cash flow, and I want some of those tax benefits that I can get from real estate, being able to write off those operating expenses and the property management company that we're going to hire and all the repairs and things. And then also too, learning about depreciation and cost segregation. And so look, I'm not a financial expert by any means. I'm not an advisor. But when I think one of the things that I had to come up against as far as a mental roadblock was, as a physician, I was like, man, I learned all the things that I need to learn. Like, I spent years learning. Why I got to learn something else? Like, I'm tired of learning new things. I want to just be able to sit back and just kick back and just coast on what I have learned. And it did take a mindset shift to be like, no, learning doesn't just end in one day. And even though this isn't medicine, I can learn this too. So once I got over that, no, you're going to learn this too. This is very valuable. And then I got upset that why don't we learn stuff like this in medical school? But that's an aside. Learning about like cost segregation and depreciation and ways that we can significantly save on the taxes that are being taken out, taking advantage of what the IRS is providing. Okay. It's not trying to game the system. It's leveraging what is already in place to save on taxes so that we can keep more of what we earn. And that was my first taste of real estate. Listening to Letty and Kenji, me and my husband, we bought a quad, which was, a quad is the most doors you can get before stating that this is a commercial property. So we wanted to stay residential. We were able to get financing for that pretty good. We also then ended up getting a triplex and ended up finally also getting a single family home. Now, I know that speaks against the whole multifamily rental thing, but this home looked so good and it was so cheap. I was like, man, I can't let this pass up. So that was what we ended up getting, just long-term renters in multifamilies. And actually, I mean, Letty and Kenji provided like a cash-on-cash calculator so that we could do our due diligence about the kind of properties we got and the pricing and the financing and all of that. And we ended up, getting that mailbox money. However, it was okay as far as the amount of money, but it was like, what else do we have to save on taxes, right? Because this is now starting to whet my appetite. And my husband started to listen to podcasts as well about this whole topic of real estate. And real estate, there's just it's huge, right? Some people think that real estate is just you're the landlord of like one property and you get calls about like plumbing and stuff. And it's like,
fix my toilet.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the nightmare. That's like a little eyedropper in the huge ocean of what real estate is. So he was looking at, well, why don't we talk about syndications, which is just essentially grouping with a bunch of different investors, pulling in to get, a big property as it is in real estate, but, other things can be syndicated as well. But we were looking at pooling our money together, to join other investors because he had formed a relationship with this person who was leading and putting together the syndication deal. And we did that. And actually we're still in it because it takes place over the course of like 5 years. And the way the deal is structured, we get most of our distributions like at the end of the deal. So I can't tell you how that investment has gone yet.
Yeah.
But also learning about land easements, conservation easements. I mean, and for those who are like, what the heck is a conservation easement? Basically, we paired with this company who they offer these kinds of deals where land is to be protected, nothing to be built on it. However, when you look at the potential revenue of that land, that is where the worth of that land comes in. And we put in like 25K and was able to write off 100K
Oh,
in
wow.
taxes because of our tax bracket. And we ended up getting like the tax bracket that we were at was like 35%. And so we were able to get like a 35K tax return in doing like this conservation easement. So that was like another way that significantly decreased our tax burden with the multifamily rentals, with the conservation easement. And then getting back to sort of the renters, short-term rentals was becoming a real big thing. I mean, it still is, but we ended up getting 2 single-family homes to do short-term rentals in. One is sort of a beachside coastal home in Norfolk, Virginia, and the other one is more of a rural home in Lexington, Virginia. And it has been really fun, actually, because not only are we, we bought these properties, but we're creating an experience. So, the short-term rental market is more high touch, and it's not just a place for somebody to crash, but it's like curating the kind of experience we want our guests to have. And it was through that I realized, oh my gosh, I like decorating spaces. I like this curation, and it very much vibes with what I do in medicine, which I'm a pediatric pain physician, and a lot of what I do in discussing with patients their care is curating a personalized treatment plan based off of who they are and what they would be willing to do. Because patients come in thinking that medications is all that we have to treat pain, when it's like, actually, that is such a narrow view. We have cognitive techniques, we have physical therapy, we have acupuncture, and we curate a plan. And so short-term rentals, curating an experience, it was in line with what I was doing, just in a different way. So I strongly encourage for anyone who's listening to this who is afraid of real estate, afraid that they can't learn anything new. It's like, hello, you spent decades proving that you can learn new things, and you've done more scarier things, right? Whether that is doing a spinal tap or opening someone up or, counseling someone who's about to die. I mean, if you can do those things, you can do this. And you may find that this is tapping into a part of yourself that medicine just doesn't get to. A more creative part of yourself, maybe a more enterprising part of yourself. And that's what has been incredibly illuminating for me on this journey.
So the idea of leveraging the tax code is not taking advantage of it. And a lot of this, we're talking about depreciation, cost seg. Neither of us are CPAs or tax attorneys, so disclosure there. But through our own experience, we can share this. The government gives us pathways to keep more of the money we make by investing in the things that benefit us as a society. Investing in real estate is good. Home ownership is good. And that's why these benefits are there. It's just like you say, it's not taking advantage of the system. It's using what we're given. And the overwhelming part, and you mentioned, if you can do that, you can do this. The overwhelming part of the tax code is just that. Was it like 13,000 pages or something ridiculous like that? It's like, come on. I don't personally want to know anything about that unless what's going to help me. And what's going to help you is real estate, and investing in these ways that solar power, gas and oil, car washes, they all have these means of depreciation. So just understanding the benefits of depreciation, not knowing where or how it comes from and in the ins and outs and how I ought to do this. That's why we work with professionals. But all of this depreciation is fascinating. We talked about in single family, up to 1 to 4, that's residential. You get 5 and above typically, that's into commercial. You talked about syndications, and syndications, you can actually, depending on the deal structure, you can get the depreciation from the deal there as well too. But the one thing that we haven't talked about yet, Elisha, is that this is all typically going to be passive income, which means we have passive losses can only offset the passive income. You touched on short term. There are some avenues in short term that allow us to get this flag that's saying, hey, I'm a real estate professional. And then I can offset my active income, the old W-2 that we've talked about, income, with my passive losses. And then we can accelerate those in the current laws, the way the current laws are. We could accelerate those using a cost segregation analysis to accelerate those depreciations and even hold on to more. The cool thing about syndications too, there's this kind of delayed thing that you can do. It's called a lazy 1031, right? I believe is a term where you can, the depreciation, if I can't use all my depreciation this year, I can delay it till next year. And you're talking about the syndication you have, if that return of capital is in 5 years, if I could somehow delay this delay all my depreciation until this comes in, then I'm offsetting that. I'm keeping more of the money that I'm making. So there's just some things to throw out there. Say it all is possible, even if you don't have 100% of your time to devote to real estate. There are still paths and mechanism using the tax code, not taking advantages of it, but using it to your advantage and making sure that you're getting the most out of it as possible. And I think you said it perfectly. You learn by listening to others and watching what others doing. So putting those people around you that are already doing these things is really important, and watching things go through full cycle. If you can do that, you can do this. I think that's going to be my takeaway from this conversation. If you can do a spinal tap, come on. I played the guitar before this. So if you do spinal tap, I play the guitar. I think you got this. You can come on. You can do this. Don't be overwhelmed by it, and just take action. What would you say was, I guess, or is the hardest part about your long-term rentals, the single family stuff, the 1-to-4? What's been your biggest challenge with those?
I think that when we bought those properties, we inherited those tenants. So, we kept those leases. We didn't sort of quote unquote kick anyone out. But we didn't have the opportunity to vet the tenants. And we didn't have also the opportunity to update the space. So I think that was a bit of a challenge. And then we're running into now, times are hard. There's no question about that. Rate of inflation, interest rates, a whole bunch of stuff. And we have a few tenants that are now sort of, they've fallen behind in payments. And then the nature of the property itself, a third thing that has come up is that it needs upkeep. And behind one of the properties is a deck. The deck needed structural repair, and the property manager hired a company. Whoever came in inadvertently took the post of the deck and put it in the ground in such a way where it busted a pipe.
Oh.
And it flooded out our tenants who were in the lower level. So that was a 5-figure repair. Now, granted, as we mentioned, we're able to write this off, but we still have to come up front with the expense. And we're still waiting on the insurance payout from this incident, which happened at least over a year ago now. So those are some of the challenges that come with the long-term renters. But as I mentioned, though, we're doing very well as far as it being the property manager. It did an amazing job. We very rarely get calls from the property manager. Maybe they're like, hey, we need to replace a fridge. And it's like, okay, go ahead. But I think that what really helped us was hiring a property management team. And Letty and Kenji and that course that they have, the Zero to Freedom course, really helped with that. Also, too, as I talk about this stuff, I was listening to a ton of podcasts. So Peter Kim's podcast, Passive Income MT,
Yep.
a lot about syndications. When we talk about entrepreneurship and just being able to have that freedom, Dr. Una's podcast helped me a great deal. She's a pediatrician, has her own private practice, and then has her, another course for helping other physicians become entrepreneurs. And then there's Rachel Rogers, who was a lawyer and now helps others as far as starting a business. Her whole podcast and book is like, why aren't we all millionaires? And how we all need to really look at that as being our new benchmark, given the rate of inflation and how times are, and having that autonomy to be able to do the things you want, support who you want in a very incredibly meaningful way. So by no means do I want to give the impression that, oh yeah, I just figured this out on my own. It's like, no, I am listening to all of these resources and reading books and listening to podcasts. And guess what, guys? It's interesting. And it opens up a whole new world for you, because when you're in medicine, the blinders are on. To your point about just performing, it's like we see these patients, we provide the high quality care, but guess what? It's on to the next patient. It's on to the next one. And, we're teaching residents and we're answering those emails, and, admin wants stuff, our boss wants stuff, it's a churn. So to be able to step into this space is so incredibly refreshing, because it reminds you that you have freedom and you don't have to put up with that. You can make your reality look very different. And I had to constantly be reminded of that, because it all came to a head, after, 6 years, let's see, I was attending 2 years at when I was in Houston, and then I was attending almost 5 years. So it all came to a head when my health became affected. And I was like, no, I actually have to move on doing all of what I've listened to. Because I was doing all of this, a lot of this on the side for a while. And I'm like, wow, with COVID happening and there being a significant, we were always understaffed, but let us not misunderstand. We were always understaffed when it comes to the supports that we need. But COVID just exacerbated that to the 20th degree. And now we're getting patients who are on the verge of killing themselves, literally. And they're critical. And yet we don't have the psychological supports in place. We don't have the social work supports in place. The ER is overrun and flooded. And it's like, what do you do with patients like this? So chronic toxic stress was just at an all-time high during that time. And it affected me in a huge way because, parents, one after the other, were writing me these really long messages in the patient portal after I've already spent a significant time with them in the clinic, only because they're like, hey, we know this isn't your specialty, but I need help with X or I need help with Y. And I'm not able to get a hold of my other physicians. Can you help us? And it's like, as physicians, if we can do it, we will do it, right? That's almost the issue, is that some of those boundaries can be, blurred, but if it's well within my capacity to do it and well within my license, I will help to the extent, because I love kids and I'm a partner with parents when it comes to their kids' care. But it runs its course. Mm-hmm. It absolutely runs its course. And that was the moment when, I came to work one day, I couldn't breathe. Which is so weird, because it's like I never had any breathing problems. But I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go get an albuterol inhaler once I get into work, and we'll see if that works. And it didn't. I never had asthma in my life, by the way. I was just like trying something. And I spoke to a friend of mine who's like, you need to go to the ER. Like, you can hardly say 3 words without having to catch your breath. And it was at that point that I was found to have this fluid around my lungs, not in my lungs, but around my lungs. And I ended up with a diagnosis that was pretty much just put everything on hold. And I was like, man, talk about reevaluating my life and reevaluating what is it that's really important to me. And I think to your point about us just being go, 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 go high performers, we don't take that step to ask, what is really important? What is it that I want? Because you're just going to keep go, go, go. And then you're going to go in a direction and you're just going to look up and be like, man, 30 years has gone by. And this isn't even what I dreamed of. What happened to the dreams that I had? What happened to the wants and the desires that I had? You know, your family's not even going to know you because you've been work. And the times that you do have with them, you're on the computer or you're answering calls. It's like, no, that's not the life that I want. So this period was really a moment to put into action all of what I was learning and listening to the years before.
And kind of just bouncing around on that piece, back with the inherited tenants piece. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to make sure I come back to that and talked about that just a little bit too, Elisha, because we've done this a lot. We've done where we're buying and selling or buying long-term and holding. And the things I just want to point out to everybody to watch is you can inherit tenants, but the number one thing is you are likely inheriting somebody else's problem in that regard. So just making sure you're doing your due diligence. And I'm going to start saying this more often. The Six Sigma effect of that is what's the worst? How could this affect down the line of this decision? So it is cool that you got to kind of filter or vet that tenant. It sounded like you got to vet them. So most of the time when you're inheriting tenants, you're inheriting their existing structure. They probably weren't credit checked. They probably weren't criminally background checked. So you've got challenges there. And on the bigger units, you don't get to acquire vacant properties. So this is something that just happens. Just have a checklist of things that you've got to go through to do it. And when you buy like that too, you also said that you're not able to make the repairs. Well, guess what? That's going to affect that ARV value or the appraised value of the property. So if I'm projecting this thing fixed up at in my world at $180,000, and I can't make these repairs, and all of a sudden this thing's only appraising at 120, and I needed the loan for 120, then I've got a problem there. So when we acquire with tenants, I'm looking at, especially when there's a lease in place, I'm looking at holding typically in cash until that tenant turns. Once that tenant turns, then I can do the refinance, make the improvements, hit that appraised value, increase my rental income. And the other thing I wanted to mention too, Elisha, was there's this hard part. Like there's so much of us get into what we do and understand the why behind what we do is helping people. Why do I want to help people? Because I can, because this is what I've done, but it makes me feel good. It makes me have value in this place in this time. As a landlord, I've got to draw the line. And I think you're in a kind of a position right now where you've got some tenants and you've got a big heart. You've got a heart to help other people. So now you're in a predicament. As a business person, I would stand here in front of you. I'd be at the conference table with you, Elisha, and say, Elisha, what are you doing? If they're not performing, if they're not agreeing to what they said they would be, what they would be doing, you got to make a decision. You got to make a move, because this is financial. This is your asset. This is your family, not theirs. This is your family, your kids, your table. You always have to look at every single thing that way. No matter what money you're making, you have to be intentional when you do give back to people, not because it's in the scenario that you're in with them wanting to pay rent, not being able to pay rent. And the reality of an interest rate rise or fall as them as a tenant should not affect them. They agreed to pay this. And that's that thing that we've got to juggle. So that, Elisha, paired with this big heart. And then I also juggle it, in the world of Christianity, being a good person and giving back and not holding grudges and forgiving. Now I'm juggling all these balls, but I'm still sitting at this table as an asset manager. And that asset manager at the table gives me goosebumps to think about it, because I put in every single penny, every single dime that I'm responsible for that doesn't come to me. I'm stealing that from my family. I'm stealing that from my kids. So no matter what's going on, I always keep that perspective, and it helps me understand. I want to be intentional on the things that I do. I want to have intention on the giving, because if I'm set forth to hold this asset and manage this asset, that's what I'm going to do. That enables me to give back intentionally and in a way that I could almost buy a house for somebody and give that to them. And maybe we could have, other families come in who are in need, where that's the agreement. So that's a more intentional focus, but it cannot happen without that focus on holding people accountable.
No, absolutely.
That's a hard job, though.
Yeah. Yeah. And thankfully, having a property management company, they're in place, and they, send the notices. And if someone needs to go to court, they do that. So to your point, it's like we can have a big heart and then have someone else, have a team in place who can organize and place the structures that we need, so that we ultimately are getting what we should be.
If you're providing that quality home for somebody, if you're providing that quality management, that's your part of the deal, and making sure that your asset managers and your property managers are holding people accountable. When I first started, my path was blood, sweat, and tears. Learned everything. I was fixing toilets. I was doing all of those things. I was chasing rent. It enabled me to learn a lot. In this path, my family has worked with me through the years too. And my mother, bless her soul, she's got this heart in her. She wears it on her sleeve and always wants to help everybody out. And she just did not make a good property manager. Because it was, especially if she connected with somebody on an emotional base, if there was a scenario, a domestic scenario or something, it always weighed heavy on her, and it was tough. So I challenge everybody to challenge yourself and know that line, because you can still be good with a big heart. You have to be intentional on where you place that heart is an important piece. And when I know a lot of physicians listening to this have that single family house that they had because they were an accidental landlord. Maybe you moved out of it and now you're renting it. Maybe there's family in there. They're not, let's make this a little more difficult. Let's have family as tenants, and they're not keeping up to their part of the agreement, right? Or a family that's going through domestic issues. There's so many things that affect this, but we always have to look at that and hold that perspective of being intentional where we give. And I think what's helped me is looking at every penny or dime that doesn't go this way is taking from your own table, taking from your own kids, No,
absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, we definitely, we got a good property management team in place. And I think, a lot of the issues that, I discussed have been as of recent, and we've held on to this property for years. So I have to say, it was like, I think that's what encouraged us to branch out and look at other areas of real estate and buy more properties, because we're like, man, This is fabulous.
And you moved into syndication there, and that passive bucket. What's also interesting, as we kind of go that direction, the more we put in our passive bucket, the more we get to write off in that passive bucket. So as we kind of set this direction, if we can continue to pile investments into the passive bucket, as passive as it could be as a limited partner in a syndication deal, that's the more that I get to write off too. And then if you do this lazy 1031 stuff, as those deals, as capital is returned, you can almost write everything off, So if you're putting all your bucket in the passive world, and you don't have to evict anybody, there's going to be some tough deals, Elisha, especially in the last 6 months, 12 months. I know there's a lot of listeners out there who may have not be in the best deals right now with the bridge loans, the insurance, the taxes, stuff like that. But for the most part, these are going to be the most passive way as a limited partner and being able to offset that income. If you could go back 10 years, Elisha, 10 years ago, and stand beside yourself and whisper something into your own ear, how would you guide yourself then?
Wow, because I was just so gung-ho, just so go, go, go. I think that I was starting at that age, though, with all of the schooling I've had up to that point. I started to ask myself this question: is this all there is? Is this it? I've done, I've went through so much training and I was just like asking that question: is this it? Is this it? And the moment you ask that question is the moment you know that there's more. And I would tell myself that just because I've put in all the studying I did doesn't mean that there's not going to be more studying to be had. I think that one of the big points of indignation I had was, hey, when do I get to stop learning? When do I get to stop studying? I got so upset by that because I'm like, man, but I don't know who told me that the learning stops. And not only that, but, learning the Krebs cycle is a very different learning than learning how to set up, a short-term rental, or it's different. And so I think that I would tell myself that the learning doesn't stop, but guess what? The learning it's fun. It's fun. It's not something that is akin to, the textbook learning that we had to do. So that I think I would really get out. I would break myself of that mindset. I would strongly encourage it. But again, I learned from this guy, Peterson. He says environment trumps will. So if you're around a bunch of folks who, if all of us are in academics or all of us are just going hard with seeing patients in the churn, and even the attendings that I had, just in that space and in that frame of mind for decades, of course I'm going to be of a hardened mindset and I'm not going to know anything different. But by listening to podcasts and reading, we now expand that sphere of influence. Now we're not hearing the same things day in and day out. And I would say that just because, these folks or this kind of learning isn't in the hospital, isn't in your EMR, isn't in a textbook, it's easily accessible through our phones and through our different mediums. So the education is out there, and I would just encourage folks tapping into it. Because it's easy. It's easy to listen to, these segments, and it's personable and it's fun. And you will find that, if one investment vehicle doesn't do it for you, there's other types, and you deserve to be able to make money while you sleep. I think that another big mindset shift was you don't have to work hard to make a lot of money. You just have to work differently. And so often we just couple like the churn. I got to grind. And it's like, no, you really don't. You just have to think differently and shift the way that you do things so that you have your energy, you have your time, and now you have even more money than you ever thought you could make, because you had this coupling of, work and money, work and money.
So I just wanted to mention something out of this book here is you literally read a line right out of this. And there's a section in here called How Not to Be a Rich Doctor. And on page 20, stopping your education after you graduate. That's how you don't become a rich doctor, stopping your education after you graduate. So that was just an interesting piece. I actually wrote this book, but based off of that, and the whole beginning of that section is mindset. And the reason why that plays such a big factor in our lives. I'm sorry, I was holding up the book. The book is called How to Get Rich as a Doctor. And that section of that book, the mindset is so important. It's up front. That's what has to happen. The information is out there. Expanding your associations, listening to podcasts, there's books. It's different. It's not the textbooks learning that, like you were mentioning, Elisha. It's out there. Your colleagues don't get stuck in your circle of high performance doctors going in on the churn because everybody's got their blinders on. Don't be afraid to get out of your circle. Start going to REI. Start going into Facebook groups. Start listening. There are so many other physicians now sharing their experiences, just like Elisha. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, because it's possible. The information is out there. Don't be upset that you didn't get it during med school. That wasn't the right time. And if that was something that was there, would you have absorbed it at that time? I have the same almost like anger or frustration in me. It was like the first time I sat in a lecture hall and I learned about leveraging capital and building this cash flow for long-term rentals, and it just gave me goosebumps. And it just like this epiphany in my life, like, why isn't everybody doing this? And then why didn't I learn about this in high school? And it's easy for me to tell myself that idea of maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe I did hear it. The speed of information is different now. There's so much in front of us. We have so much opportunity. The time is now. No matter where you're at in your career, the time is now. If you're hearing this and you're curious, the seed has been planted. You're surrounding yourself with people that are not only talking about this and learning about this, but we're doing it. We're taking action. And that's what we're doing. We're changing knowledge into wisdom by taking action. So we need to study. We need to learn. Do not stop your education after you graduate. That is really, really important. So Elisha, thank you for your time today, Elisha. And man, this sharing your experience, because I hope that the listeners have taken this small piece, one single thing from this, and is able to make a change in their life. And that affects down the line. That affects the people they're helping. If you come to work every day with your bucket full, whether it's your happiness bucket, your money bucket, whatever it may be, if those buckets are full, you're going to be able to have that reset with your patient each and every day. So I do want to mention that the information is out there. You are a wealth of knowledge and experience that the listeners can find you at ElishaPetersonMD.com, ElishaPetersonMD.com, which will also be in the description of the podcast as well, too. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your time today.
Oh, thank you for having me on. And I'm also the host of a podcast called Sevo, Sistas, which is intended to demystify and diversify the field of anesthesiology, all within the duration of an anesthesia break. So if you are interested in anesthesiology, I encourage you to look that podcast up. Also, I'm on Twitter as well. Also known as X at ePetersonMD. So feel free to reach out. I thoroughly enjoyed this. We could have just kept talking, Brett.
I know. It would be kind of short.
So I really appreciate this.
Awesome.
And thank you again for the invitation.
Absolutely. And that podcast is Sevo Sistas, SEVOSISTAS.
Yeah.
Sevo Sistas. Awesome. And to the listeners out there today, thank you for your time. If you've hung all the way through this, we're running close to about 60 minutes on this recording. Well, I hope that there was some massive value here for you. If you have additional questions, if you want to reach out to a colleague, please reach out to Elisha on the website there, on Twitter, what used to be called Twitter. Thank you for the gentleman who purchased it and changed the name to X. So everybody now has two names. But anyway, reach out. Don't hesitate. If the seed's there, grow the seed, nurture it. Think of your path where you're at now, whether it's med school, whether you're, in residency, you're attending, wherever you may be, fellowship, maybe you're towards the end of your career. We're nurturing this idea. Nurture it. Think of it as a garden. We've got to plant the seed. If the seed is planted, then we've got to water it. We've got to keep the weeds out. Once that idea starts growing fruit, there's going to be so many things, insects and weeds and animals are going to be coming to take away what you have grown. And when that happens, just think about what it took to get there. Shift your focus back to not your what, but your why, and making sure that you're figuring out who you want to be, how you want to get there, why you want to be there, and enjoying life every second that you get the chance, being grateful. Grateful again for Elisha Peterson here today. Thank you for listening. If you get the chance, shoot us an email, info@physicianwealthsystems.com. Let us know if you have any questions. If you'd like to be a guest, don't be afraid to leave us a review on Spotify or Apple too. Thank you. Until next time, the Real Estate Mogul MD.